Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first event in our series of Wednesday professional development workshops for the 2021 Leadership Alliance summer programming. Really excited to be here to see all of you. So my name is Chloe Lopez-Lee. I'm in the third year of my neuroscience PhD at Weill Cornell Medicine. I participated in the Leadership Alliance National Symposium for 2 years as an undergraduate at Mount Holyoke College, and recently received an NIH grant for my research studying sex differences in the brain's immune response to Alzheimer's disease. I will be the moderator for today's event. This event is a component of the Leadership Alliance Virtual Professional Development Series. Leadership Alliance partners created this initiative to ensure continuity of skill building, networking, and exposure to graduate programs for students from across the country. Paired with our Monday evening Conversations with a Doctoral Scholar series, we hope to provide you with a platform for discussion of critical issues, networking with each other and our wonderful panelists, as well as for learning approaches and skills for navigating your research careers. This series would not be possible without the work of my colleagues at Brown University, Chaminade University in Honolulu, Weill Cornell Medical College, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, Vanderbilt University, and Xavier University of Louisiana. To those colleagues, thank you for your efforts in creating this program. Today, we will be talking about making an impact with a PhD. As a participant in this series, you are likely interested in at least learning more about obtaining a PhD. Whether you are just learning about PhD programs or you already are applying to graduate school, it is impossible to know the full scope of career opportunities a PhD can afford you. This session is an opportunity to hear from professionals who have used their graduate school education to follow their passion and make a difference. We are grateful to all of them for their participation. I will now invite our panelists to turn their cameras on as I will start introducing each one individually. Fantastic. So I'm going to start with Dr. Travis Boyce. So yeah, he's waving over there. Dr. Boyce is the department chair and associate professor of African American Studies at San Jose State University. He also serves as the director of the Ethnic Studies Collaborative. A 2001 SR-EIP fellow at Yale University, he received his BA in history from Claflin University and a master's also in history and PhD in cultural studies from Ohio University. His areas of research interest are 20th century African American history and popular culture, particularly in the areas of fashion, race, and the sporting world. His work has appeared in edited collections and in peer-reviewed academic journals. He is the co-editor of the book Historicizing Fear, Ignorance, Vilification, and Othering, published in 2020 by the University Press of Colorado. Presently, Dr. Boyce is working on 2 book projects, Steady and Measured, the biography of Benner C. Turner, an African-American college president during the Civil Rights Movement, and #More Than an Athlete, Fashion, Social Justice, and the Counter-Narratives of the Modern-Day Activist Athlete. Dr. Boyce currently resides in San Francisco. Fantastic. And so now we're going to be moving on to Dr. Jade Gibbons. Dr. Gibbons is originally from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and received her BS in chemistry with a minors in biochemistry and mathematics from Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Her PhD was conferred from the pathobiology program at Brown University, and her dissertation work was based on the molecular mechanisms of ethanol toxicity during fetal brain development. She conducted her postdoctoral work at the North Carolina Central University Biotechnology Research Institute and Technology Enterprise. She studied various anti-inflammatory compounds known to enhance the enzymatic activity of a protein that inhibits the development of atherosclerosis. Upon the completion of her postdoctoral fellowship, Jade began a career as a forensic scientist for the Ventura County Sheriff's Office in Ventura, California. Assigned to the forensic biology section, her work was based on utilizing DNA analysis for human identification and comparison. Jade completed over 400 cases, resulting in over 50 hits in the combined DNA index system known as CODIS. After 11 years serving for the community as a forensic scientist, she decided to do a career change that has resulted in a new position as a field application scientist. Jade now works for Advanced Cell Diagnostics based in Newark, California, and a part of the Biotechne brand of companies. In her new role, she helps researchers and clinicians by utilizing a novel technology that enables spatial visualization of mRNA and DNA expression in tissues and cells. Additionally, her role includes conducting training and providing technical expertise, which is perfectly aligned with Jade's passion to help others by utilizing her scientific background, laboratory skills, and molecular biology expertise. So happy to have you here, Jade. And so our final panelist is Dr. Joy Jackson Guilford. Hello, great to see you. And Dr. Jackson Guilford is a director of pipeline partnerships for equality, diversity, and inclusion within the Human Resources Organization. In this role, she is responsible for developing, leading, and overseeing the strategy for developing external pipeline partnerships to drive and enhance AbbVie's early and mid-level diverse talent pipeline and opportunities through historically Black colleges and universities, known as HBCUs, as well as Hispanic serving institutions, known as HSIs. In addition to related diverse student collegiate organizations, alumni forums with diverse fraternities and sororities, professional diverse STEM/business organizations, and lastly, professional business leadership organizations. Joy has been in the pharmaceutical industry for 23 years and began her career at Abbott AbbVie 15 years ago as a medical science liaison in immunology covering rheumatology, gastroenterology, and dermatology in Georgia and South Carolina. In 2009, she began her leadership journey as a regional manager and field director for the Rheumatology Southeast and South Central Region MSL teams, the National Neuroscience MSL team, and the Gastroenterology Southeast MSL team before joining the HR team in October 2018. She has a Master of Science degree in Pharmaceutical Sciences, as well as a PhD in Pharmacology Toxicology from Florida A&M University. Outside of work, Joy is very involved with giving back to the community through several organizations. She also enjoys mentoring and engaging students in the STEAM field and recently developed the JJG STEAM Foundation, Inc., a 501c3 organization whose mission is to create and foster a learning environment that inspires students to pursue future careers in the areas of science, technology, engineering, arts, or math. In addition, the foundation provides support to graduate seniors that plan to major in those fields as well. Fantastic. So glad to have all of you here today. That concludes the introductions for our panelists. So now we can get into the fun part, which is the actual questions. So I'll start off with just kind of a broad question, and feel free to chime in. So the first question that we received are, what are the skills needed to acquire a PhD? So if anyone wants to start, feel free to just unmute and go forward.
Well, hello, everyone. I suppose I can go ahead and get started. So first of all, it's great to be here. I participated in the Alliance 20 years ago, approximately 20 years ago in 2001. So I really enjoy coming back and participating in these programs. So I just wanted to let you all know it's a pleasure. But in terms of the skills I think students should have to acquire a PhD, certainly the reading comprehension, the ability to read critically, writing, and understand that writing is a skill that improves over time. I'm constantly 20 years removed, still improving on my own writing. So, but still writing is something to keep in mind. Also, just your ability to take initiative. If that's a skill, like this notion of being resourceful and initiatives. Oftentimes, there may be situations in your graduate school career where you may be looking for funding. And so there may be a pot of money sitting untouched in a certain university office. And, you know, it's important that one takes initiative to move forward of completing your PhD program. I'll let my other colleagues jump in, but those are three things I think about.
Hi, everyone. I actually was in the Leadership Alliance the same time as Travis, so good to see you again. One skill I would like to highlight is the ability to pivot. I think that a lot of us have an idea of what it's like to be in graduate school and what it is to get a project done and how things are supposed to come together. But a lot of it is just taking the time and understanding that it's good to have a plan A, B, and C, maybe even a D, E, F. Go far down as you need to, and just be ready because things can happen. We all know that. We just went through a pandemic, so we're still in a pandemic, but still, just remember to just be ready to pivot. And that to me is a skill that I definitely had to acquire and learn as I went through my PhD.
Thank you, Travis and Jade, for leading off. I would add to what has already been said, the ability is similar to what Jade said, but to be able to multitask because there are going to be several things going on all at one time, right? So you're going to have your research projects that you're working on. At the same time, you're going to need to be writing papers. You're going to be doing the need to do your statistical analysis. And so you can't go in with a one-track mind. I'm going to do all of my research and then I'm going to do the writing. And then you have to have the ability to multitask. And if you're planning on getting out of school, at least at a decent time, you're going to have the ability to multitask. Otherwise, you'll be there for quite some time. So I would just add that to what has already been said by my colleagues.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for chiming in. We actually have a follow-up from the audience asking, since we've all talked a little bit about the skills, how your PhD influenced your current position as a professional. Is there, one thing that you feel like it really ingrained in you, just in your professional identity, that you feel like, wow, I couldn't have gotten this any other way?
One thing I think that I've always been able to carry through my careers with my PhD is just the ability to ask questions and then also know how to find answers. And I tell a lot of people are really impressed when you're like, oh, I got my PhD. They're like, really? And I'm like, basically, I learned how to answer questions and how to be resourceful and how to roll with things. And so that's the one thing. Well, that's like several, but those are things that definitely all come together and to this day are a strength in my current career path.
I would just add for me, when I was getting my PhD, I was a Society for Neuroscience Minority Fellow. I think they call it Neuroscience Scholars Program now or something of that sort. But the ability to be able to present and share my data at several conferences has been very key for me. Even in this role, I'll back up. Even as a medical science liaison, because you have to have the ability and be willing to share data with your key opinion leaders, so it helped there. It's also helped in my current role as well. I'll also say statistical analysis, just those pieces, developing presentations, just pulling together slides and, finding different things to add in order to ensure that you're telling that full story, right? When you're doing your slide presentations, all of those things I would say that I learned in graduate school have been extremely useful in my career journey.
And to piggyback off of Dr. Gibbons, I like the idea of asking questions, this ability, the same thing. I'm just going to just piggyback and just like the ability to ask questions and also just to find sources, but credible sources. And I think about this in our daily social discourse, especially in the age of quote unquote fake news. And, a PhD or not, these are skills, we all need if we want to be a forward-thinking society, functioning society. It's what sources are credible. So that's something I think that's helpful of what you can take away from a PhD.
Fantastic. Very helpful to hear, especially as someone who hasn't graduated yet. So thank you for giving me some insight into, 10 years from now. So it also, taking a couple of steps back, another question that our audience members had was, how did you know getting a PhD was right for you? Especially when you're young and don't even know what you want to be yet. And it's such a big commitment because it's not like a 2-year master's program. Would just love to hear your thought process on that as well.
Go ahead, Jade.
Well, the funny thing about that question was that when I started, I didn't know if that was what I should be doing. I knew I didn't want to go to medical school. I knew I really, really enjoyed science. But I didn't know until I was going through it officially. I didn't really know that this was the path I should be taking. So for me, I didn't know ahead of time. I just knew that I needed to do something, and this was going to be funded. And I really loved being in the lab. So I figured I'd just figure it out, and it all ended up coming together. So I'm glad that I stuck with it. And that's the main point, I guess. But yeah, I didn't know ahead of time.
So I'll just add, unlike Jade, I had originally planned to go to medical school. As a matter of fact, I had been already admitted into Boston University School of Medicine's early medical school selection program. So I entered that as a sophomore in undergrad. And so that was the plan. And then I spent a couple of summers there. And then one of the summers, I actually did a rotation with an oncologist. And that was a pretty emotional time for me. And so I took a step back and I said, we did that pivot that Jay talked about. And I said, you know what, I've been doing so much research as well, because I was doing research back at my undergrad institution and at Morehouse School of Medicine. And so I said, let me then look into what I'm actually doing. So I learned it was pharmacology, and I didn't know that at first. But doing research in pharmacology, knowing it was the study of drugs and how they affect the body, I was thinking, well, that's not too far away from medicine. So maybe I'll look into that route. So that's what I decided to do. And as Jay said, at first I wasn't really sure. So I started out with the master's, as you all heard. I did the master's first because I wasn't sure that this was the route to take, but then I really enjoyed it. So I ended up taking all of my PhD courses while completing the master's, so that when I got to my PhD research work, all I would have left to do is the research work, write the dissertation, and go from there. And as I said, I wasn't really sure, but I remember as I was preparing to move to Tallahassee, and I was at the mall and I was buying some paintings, to actually, pull my apartment together. And I remember the artist looking at me and he said, I don't know why I'm saying this to you, but I want you to know that you're making the right decision. And that for me just sealed it right then and there. So I knew then, I felt comfortable, and I knew this was the route to take, and it has not failed me at all. So I'm so excited that and glad that I decided to go this route.
And I can just take 30 seconds and just follow up. Great questions, answers by Dr. Gibbons and Dr. Jackson. For me, and I'll back up a little bit. And I just noticed a question from a student in the audience, from Timmy, specifically pursuing a master's degree and being advised by my mentor, Dr. Glenda Gilmore at Yale University 20 years ago, just go do a master's degree first to try to figure things out. That was the best decision for me. Let's not even talk about the PhD at the moment, but go get a master's degree and think about the opportunities and skill sets that you can take away from that. And think about the content knowledge you can get from a traditional master's history program at a very, very good mid-sized school, Ohio University. So that's what I did first. And that informed me of how to best move on with my academic career. I had an opportunity towards the end of my master's program to stop and go into the federal government and work for a federal agency. I decided to pursue on with my educational career. But at the end of the day, I think it's important for many people to just take it a little slow and pursue a master's first, because that's a shorter commitment.
Yeah, very important point. I know a lot of my classmates as well have pursued a master's before a PhD, and I don't know any of them who considered it a waste of time or any sentiment similar to that at all. They all were very happy that they did it. But that segues really nicely into some individual questions. We had some questions already submitted beforehand that were addressed to individual panelists, and would love people to have the opportunity to really capitalize on each of your experiences. And so for Dr. Jackson Guilford, one of the questions was, were there any surprising or unexpected challenges you came across when first developing the JJG STEAM Foundation?
So I will say that the JJG STEAM Foundation was birthed from a surprise, or someone saying to me that I could not do something that way. And so I had planned, I had wanted to provide a scholarship opportunity for a student majoring in STEAM. And I wanted to do it through another organization. And they told me that I could not have a scholarship in my name. And I said, but I raised the money for the scholarship. So can it not, have some, can you at least acknowledge that? And they were like, no. And I said, okay. And I will be honest, it did hurt my feelings. But one day I was sitting there and, my voice spoke to me and said, but you and your husband have a foundation. So why do you need to go through them to give a scholarship? Oh, that is correct. So I already knew how to, what was needed to pull a foundation together. And so I went through the process, got everything done, 501c3 done. And I'm pleased to announce last year we gave our first scholarships. And so as of this year, we've given $6,000 in scholarships to students. And so we will continue to grow on that. And so I'm super excited about it and the journey that we're going on. And we have some plans to also engage students at an early age, so that there will be students who understand that even though they think science is hard, or they think this area is hard, it's really not as hard as they think. And just to encourage them, because when we think about it, we're moving to the technology, as we continue, those jobs have become more and more available to us, but we only have 20% of high school students who actually major in those areas. And so we have to start early and pique the interest early so that we can continue that. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much for the thoughtful answer. Dr. Gibbons, we also have a question for you. So in particular, someone wrote, your bio is impressive, exclamation point. How did you go about connecting and networking with professionals and institutions to make strides in your academic career? And what advice would you give to students who are trying to build a network?
Thank you for that question and the exclamation points. So let's see. Network, I should have said that also when we were talking about the skills needed for a PhD. Networking is huge. And at the time, whenever we would have graduate socials and Leadership Alliance events, I didn't realize that that was just like networking in disguise, right? And so, so now in hindsight, I think to myself, I wish I would have taken more time to really foster some of those relationships I made, some of the people I met that I thought to myself, oh, that's interesting. And then I'm like off doing some experiment where it's like, I should have maybe took the time, maybe just write myself a little note, like catch up with this person later and really foster connections. That being said, I did have a few very strategic people that I had in my network that kept me going and got me through my PhD. One of them was the director of Leadership Alliance at the time, who was Valerie Wilson at Brown. And it got to the point where I needed to figure out how I was going to make my exit. And so she literally sat me down in her office and we made an 18-month plan of what we're going to do each month to get me out and on with my life. And so that is something I will never forget about her. And we were literally within like 1 month of the plan. Like it was so on point, and she took the time to actually do that with me and foster that relationship and say, okay, so this is what you need to look out for. This is what you need to do. Don't forget this. And it was literally invaluable. And I know I could have done it without her, but it wouldn't have been nearly as efficient. It wouldn't have made any sense. And who knows my mental state at the end. And so that's just one of the many connections I made, but hers in particular, the fostering and really engaging with someone who had been through this before and just knew the perfect way to like craft out a plan. It was literally invaluable. And that's probably the best example of a network connection that I made that was really, really, really helpful and invaluable. I hope I answered the question. Was that pretty much it? Okay. And then also, of course, the other Leadership Alliance students I met at Lands and just in my program, like there's some of those people I still interact with today. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget those people. And, you know, I've reached out over the years and tried to keep them in my network as well. So.
Chloe,
thank
do
you.
you mind if I add to what Jade has mentioned? I cannot stress enough the importance of networking. I cannot stress that enough. I will say to you, my entire career from my postdoc in industry at Lilly to now has all been through networking. Every pivot that I have made has been through networking of some sort, whether it was someone that I knew, someone I had met in the past, going over to the Career Center and sharing with him, you need to have resources for graduate students. And he said, well, come to this meeting and let's see if this will be beneficial for graduate students. And that's where I met my postdoc advisor at Lilly. All of these things would not have been possible without networking. Now, I know everyone is saying, okay, but it's the pandemic and we're not getting out the way we used to. And that's okay because you have LinkedIn. So I can't stress enough the importance. I know that sometimes graduate students don't engage in social media, but LinkedIn is one that will be very beneficial for you. So go on LinkedIn, find people who you have interesting roles that you may be interested in, connect with them. Don't send your resume unless they ask for it, but that is a way for you to make those connections because at some point you're going to be finishing your PhD and you're going to be looking for a role. And so you can go back and pull those people that you've created those relationships with. So Jade, you hit a point for me that I wanted to add to that, but I cannot stress students the importance of networking.
Yeah, thank you both so much for highlighting that. Dr. Boyce, just want to give you the opportunity to chime in if you'd like.
Oh, absolutely. I'll just keep this at 15 seconds. Yeah, networking is important. And also to, I was about to say, you know, these opportunities are given to you because someone believes in you. You know, I think we're often believe, you know, in meritocracy, there is this meritocracy system, but it's more than ever, it's people who believe in you who are giving these opportunities. So part of that networking is being grateful and also understanding, you know, we lift each other up. You know, someone's pushing you up in these positions because they want to see you succeed.
Absolutely. And I think your answers all align so nicely because I feel like they hit on, you know, the three core aspects of networking, one of which is gratitude, right? So being grateful and wanting to have a bi-directional contribution. The other is, you know, quality. So making connections that are actually, you know, meaningful to you. And then the other is also reach, right? So making sure you're making network connections that are relevant to what you need and to your career advancement. So I appreciate that all. I don't know if you did that intentionally, but it just was a beautiful gradient in my mind. So thank you for setting that up. Dr. Boyce, also your individual question as well. So someone wrote, on top of research, you're also working on 2 book projects. How do you maintain a work-life balance and what motivates you to take on new endeavors?
Okay, I'm gonna try my comedic play here. What's work-life balance? And that's sarcasm. I'm joking when I say that. A couple of things. So this is the reason why I'm working on 2 book projects. One, I'm interested just continuing just to advance my career and just get this out the way as I settle in my new role as a department chair here at San Jose State University. So I want to devote more time to the administrative part. So this is a great time to do it, just to finish up 2 major writing projects. But more importantly, I would encourage all folks here on the Zoom call today, just take advantage of the money to get those projects done. Oftentimes, book projects require time and money. And so in my situation, I had a generous startup fund here at my institution, and it has to get done, be exhausted as soon as possible. So my strategy was it's best just to go ahead and get these projects done now while the money is still there. So I would encourage students to, whether it's a fellowship or you start your academic career and negotiate the startup fund, but take full advantage of that. In my situation, in terms of the work-life balance, it seems like a lot of work, but it's not really a lot of work. I'm working with 2 professional editors, 2 wonderful editors for each book project, and we set writing goals. So I'm able to write quickly for the respective projects and able to hand that off to my editors, like chapter by chapter. And it's making the process go much faster than I anticipate. So the work-life balance is fine. So again, I was joking about what work-life, but yeah, the work-life balance is fine. And also it's great to be here in the Bay Area where the weather can be cooperative, but it's beautiful here. I'm able to get out and go run, hang out with my partner here, and it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your transparency. I think, we don't hear often enough about how things like the weather influence, our work-life balance, because it's real, like moving certain places, being around certain people, like definitely contributes to your professional life, but oftentimes isn't discussed. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Sorry. Thanks. We also have a question that I think really hits on the title of this seminar. So someone wrote, as a political science major, it's important that their work creates change for underserved communities through policy. So how does work done during or after a PhD program affect academic discourse, politics, or other real world outcomes? It's a big question, but an important one.
I can jump in if my colleagues want. This is what I'm seeing all the time, especially within the last 5 or 6 years in terms of our political and social discourse. The media has reached out to academia. They've done that for years, even prior to the 2016 election. But more and more, we're seeing the media reaching out to academic experts who have an expertise in a certain issue or topic. And so as you think about your career, whether you want to go into academia or you want to go in the industry, this is where the value of having a PhD, or more importantly, having an expertise and able to share that to a broader audience is important. So, and I hope I answer your question, that I think it's important that you have those skills, and because they're definitely needed as part of the social political discourse.
Great. Dr. Gibbons, Dr. Jackson Guilford, do either of you want to chime in? No worries if not.
I would just say that, let's see. So, because I'm reading the question, and well, as you know, I wasn't in political science or in that realm, but part of why I was excited to do forensics was that I could do science and then I could impact the community and be of service and help. And so aside from that, I think that just being in science as a Black woman creates the ability to see themselves in a role like this. And so if anything, that's the way that I feel like I'm kind of giving back as well, like aside from service I may do, but also just being here and letting people see that it's possible and that they too can be where I am as well. So that's one way that I kind of feel like I may be having a real world outcome as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I also think representation, like there has been a whole movement, right, of representation matters in the media, but sometimes it isn't as discussed that it also matters on, you know, kind of the micro level of day-to-day interactions with your boss, day-to-day interactions with your coworkers. So definitely makes a big difference. I would love to ask a question that I also think we haven't talked about much. So someone in the audience asked, did educational expenses ever prevent you from continuing with your master's or doctoral degree? And they mentioned that it's expensive and are curious if you obtain scholarships or other types of aid to help you continue your education.
So I can start with that one. I did have a grant awarded to me in graduate school, which did help with, you know, the expenses. However, I still had living expenses, right? So I had an apartment, a car, other things. And so what I did, I found, happened to find like part-time jobs that would allow me an opportunity to still study. So it wasn't one that, you know, completely engulfed all of my time where I didn't have time to study. So I was basically an office assistant for someone. So in between answering telephone and doing a few things, I was studying. And so I did find other means to help with the other expenses that I had, but just to pay for tuition and all of that, I did receive a fellowship for that.
I appreciate Dr. Jackson Guilford just touching on that topic. I think that's something that's not emphasized is the living expenses in graduate school. So it more than likely, once you're admitted into a graduate program, more than likely you will get some type of tuition waiver and stipend, whether it's through a TA-ship, a research assistantship, or, you know, the best thing to do is get a fellowship, you know, a non-service fellowship. However, you know, that's something that you have to keep in mind when selecting your respective graduate program. Think about what city it's in terms of living expenses. I don't recommend living here in San Francisco. It's super expensive to live here as a graduate student. But think about just the living expenses and how that comes into account as well. I will share a story I never shared with anyone. Like, this is what I did in graduate school, but, you know, we're good here. And so when I was in graduate school, I lived in this apartment complex. It was a student apartment complex in Athens, Ohio. And I applied for this position called the resident director. And basically, I had to do lockouts in the evening. So I had to have a beeper on my person between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. And it was sort of like a hotel style of an apartment complex. And so oftentimes keys get demagnetized. But I must say that was the easiest job I've ever had. Like, I would rarely get calls, and my rent was covered. And I was very grateful for that. On top of that, I had my graduate assistantship on campus. And so I was able to save money and things like that. But I think that's an important piece to think about. And, you know, this is not unusual, but that's the problem in general, that the living expenses is really the issue for graduate students. So, but it's not impossible. And you should not be deterred, even if you have to take out a loan to cover your graduate expenses. This is all an investment. And that's how you have to kind of think about your educational experiences, even, and also like writing a book, if you're paying for copy editing, kind of think about these things as an investment for the long-term role. So that's something I did in graduate school.
So I'm gonna, since we're all family here, I'm gonna give a cautionary tale on what not to do in graduate school with your finances. So I had a really good friend of mine, and she said, you know what? Just put everything on your credit card. When you finish, you'll have a whole lot of money. And I was like, of course, I'm getting a PhD. I'm going to be rich in a couple of years. Fast forward, I finished up and I was in a mountain of debt. So let me just say, do not rack up a whole lot of credit card debt. Figure out a way to make extra money somehow, be frugal, have roommates, do what it takes so that you're not stressed out about finances on top of finishing your thesis, on top of trying to get your experiments done. Just try to stay focused, live below your means, and just do what you need to do, because this is a short season. You're there for one thing. You're not there to live outside your means. You can do that later. But at this point, focus on the task at hand and don't rack up a whole bunch of credit card debt. But it did not jeopardize me finishing. So I can say that. But I just want to say, aside, keep that in mind.
Yeah, thank you so much for these stories. They're also super relatable. Like, no one really tells you how credit cards work. And so you're kind of like, yay, free money, and you get points when you spend it and you never have to pay it back, but then you do. And people kind of forget to mention that. So really appreciate that. And also appreciate the reminder that, even when you're in your PhD and you're told to focus on one thing, life happens. There are other things in motion. And that's just life. But no, go for it.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I would also make another recommendation. And this is why it's a benefit to get your master's first. Another thing I did in graduate school, well, particularly when I was in my PhD program, I went home during the summers to South Carolina. I was born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina, went to school in Orangeburg. And so during my summers in my PhD, since I was qualified to become a lecturer, I taught African-American history classes at South Carolina State University during the summers, as well as was in the archives doing my research for my PhD dissertation as well. So that's a benefit of getting your master's first or during the process of this is a way to make some money during the summer on top of your graduate assistantship or fellowship as well. So don't be afraid of that. In fact, as a department chair at San Jose, we need lecturers. We need African-American studies lecturers like now. So if you have an MA, please, we need you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Boyce, I think that's an important reminder. There are many, many, many graduate students who live at home. I lived at home my first year and then moved into an affordable housing unit. Money is a thing. I also really appreciated your analogy of, the PhD as an investment, right? Because I think especially if you come from a family where you've lived paycheck to paycheck, people say like, oh, why wouldn't you just buy, like, for example, if you're going shopping, people say, oh, why wouldn't you just buy that more expensive piece of clothing that's going to last longer versus the cheaper piece of clothing that you're going to have to replace in 3 months? And the answer is that if you don't have the money for the expensive piece of clothing, it's not even an option. You got to go for the thing that's going to wear out faster. And I think sometimes it's hard to acknowledge how much that mentality can play into our educational experiences and how we interpret education. So really appreciate that analogy of, investing. And kind of in the theme of, struggles, we had a question about what each of you would say is the biggest obstacle you had to overcome while pursuing your PhD. Dr. Jackson, yeah.
So my obstacle was actually a unique, an experience, and so I'll go through it. Like we said, we're all family here, so we'll share. So I struggled with my pharmacology class. That was my major, but I struggled with the class because it was different from all of the classes I had taken in undergrad on biology. There was just something different about it that wasn't clicking for me at first. And so as a graduate student, as you know, you cannot make any C's. And I made a C for the first time and I was devastated by it. And so, I just had to just say, listen, you have to figure out a different way of studying for this class. What you were doing before is not working. And I'm telling you, I was writing flashcards. I was doing it all, but it still wasn't sticking. But what happened was I retook the class and I made it be in the class, so I was good. But what happened was, for whatever reason, the class retake wasn't captured. So when I got ready to transition to the PhD program, they were saying I couldn't be admitted because I didn't pass pharmacology. And I'm like, wait, yes, I did. Like, what is happening here? So I went to the professor, and I'm going to tell you, it was a whole semester issue. And so, of course, what does that do? That delays your research work. It delays, everything you're doing. And so, I said, I'm going to just step back. I went to the associate vice president of student affairs and worked with her on it. And when it all was said and done, they had to come back and apologize for that whole semester that was wasted for something that already existed, that for whatever reason, it wasn't there. But most importantly, it appeared to me, and maybe it was just me, that the dean was one that was really, really big on ensuring that I was not admitted to the PhD program. And I'm going to tell you all, when and I get emotional when I talk about it, but when I defended my dissertation that day, he was sitting in the room. And I always remind myself, no one knows your research better than you. Nobody. I don't care who your major professor is. I don't care who's on your committee. Nobody knows it. And when I tell you, I was rattling that data off and I was presenting like no other, and all he could do is sit there and smile. And that to me was my win, because he tried so hard to keep me from getting the PhD. And now he's friends. Of course, he sent me a LinkedIn friend request, and I was like, I'm not even gonna be bothered. But I did accept his friend request. And I've even given back after he left, but I've given back to the institution, right? And so now he comes and he says, well, thank you so much. But I said all that to say, you can't let a roadblock keep you from your goal, and you can't hold a grudge. It is what it is. It was for a time. It was for such a time as that point of time. But now I can truly say I overcame that. He knows it. He sees it. He sees my LinkedIn post and what I'm doing now. So you just can't let people be the roadblock for you. You just have to keep going. Find a way to keep going. If that's talking to individuals, people, your friends, your family, whomever that is, your faith, whatever that is, you have to keep it moving, because there are going to be roadblocks, but you can make it happen, and you can do it. And so that's why I wanted to share that. Sorry if it took up too much time, but I just wanted to share that.
No, thank you so much. We're not timed. These stories are so important for people to hear, because I think people see the image and the resume and they're just like, oh my gosh, it's just a hit. And people forget that, there are institutional roadblocks. There are people who become roadblocks, and then there are people who help you through it. So I just appreciate it's a real experience. I think we've all run into at some point, you're worried you can't graduate because of a class, or, something goes wrong with your transcript, and it's just incredibly stressful. Would love to hear if either Dr. Boyce or Dr. Gibbons, you struggled with anything in particular during your graduate experience.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Jackson Guilford for bringing that up, because originally I was thinking writing, but then I remembered I can one up her and say I got a C in 2 classes and had to repeat 2 classes, and I still made it through. But enough about that. My struggle was writing, and I had a mentor who liked to, my principal investigator, she was a prolific writer. She wrote a lot, like all the time. She has a whole bunch of publications. And so I think to her, maybe writing just may come easier to her. Whereas for me, I didn't have that same experience. And so I had to work really hard at writing, so much that I was going to the writing center at Brown all the time. I had like a standing appointment, like 2 to 3 times a week, like every week for a good 3 to 4 months, just working on writing and just getting my writing together. And for me, that was a huge struggle, because I never felt like I was ever going to be good enough. I never thought I would ever finish this. I always thought that I'm just bad at this and they're not going to pass me. But with time and with working and with getting as much help as possible from as many different people as possible, I was able to gain that skill and then just keep working at it and working at it, just like Dr. Boyce said. So for me, that was probably my biggest roadblock, just learning how to write, how to get my ideas out on paper and really just write scientifically.
And for me, it was self-confidence. Again, going back and again, just looking at the questions, I had this imposter syndrome. Like, do I belong here? Do I matter? Why am I here? In this town in Southeast Ohio. So, I suffered from that. The important piece is that, and again, I go back to, and I question, this is just Dr. Travis Boyce, like I questioned the mythology of meritocracy. Again, I go back to the idea that folks help each other out. People hook each other up. There are networks. This is how people get ahead. And so my advice to folks, is surround yourself with really good people. This is not a competition in graduate school. Your colleagues, your cohort, your fellow classmates, you all are moving forward in the right direction. So it's important that you all work together. And, I had a really good friend, Dr. Winsome Chunu. She's my co-editor for the book, Historicizing Fear. And we've been publishing, post PhD together just because we work well together since graduate school. And so, and she was someone that oftentimes lifted me up when I was down, and continues today to give me the self-confidence. When I prepared for my interview 12 years ago for my first tenure track job in Northern Colorado, she helped me prepare. She gave me advice in preparing to become the department chair here at San Jose State University. So I say surround yourself with the best people and make it an easy process. Don't isolate. The worst thing you can do is isolate yourself and feel like it's a competition.
Yeah, thank you. I think, so many things about all of your answers, I think are fantastic in the sense that they're shattering a lot of stereotypes, right? So for example, the stereotype that for you to be good at science, you have to be good at math and you don't have to worry about, writing. Meanwhile, a lot of, heads of laboratories don't even work at the bench anymore. They spend all their time writing. It's kind of crazy. And so just appreciate all of your answers. We're actually 5 minutes towards the end. So kind of on a closing note, I wanted to open the floor in case any of you had, general advice, no holds barred. We had questions about managing stress. We had questions about mental health. We had questions about, a range of, academia versus industry. So if there's anything that you feel like you really want to convey to the audience, now is the time.
Hey, I would say just prepare for the future, but also just enjoy this moment as students in the Alliance. I think these are great questions that I read on the board. And I know that there are anxieties that come with it. And, if I don't do this now, I'm not going to be successful 20 years from now. I would just encourage you to just enjoy this moment with the Leadership Alliance and take all of the opportunities in. And again, collaborate with your cohorts at your respective institutions and maintain a good relationship with your mentor, with the Alliance. So that's what I would say at the moment, that, certainly prepare for the future, but you're in a great situation right now. So.
I saw a couple of questions around, the type of university where you go and get your PhD. Does that matter? And so I just wanted to leave with this. And I'm a true believer in, it's not where you go, it's what you do when you get there and what you take away with you. I was kind of discouraged to go to another HBCU for my PhD. I was told that I needed to select another school, and I decided I wasn't going to do that because that particular school that I wanted to go to had just graduated five Black PhDs in pharmacology toxicology, and that's the area I wanted to go into. So that's where I decided I wanted to go. And you know what? I work for a Fortune 100 company. So did it matter that I went to another HBCU? It absolutely did not. It's what I took away with me and what I did with what I learned while I was there. So that's the only point I wanted to leave. Thank you, Chloe.
Yeah, I really appreciate the comments from my other two colleagues, and um, yeah, they're spot on. We already talked about networking, but just remember to, like Dr. Boyce said, really just enjoy this moment. I look back on my Leadership Alliance years as clearly some of the best times in my life, and I can say that not only because of the programs, but because of the people that I had the opportunity to engage with. And so just re-emphasize to really pay attention to the network you build around you and the connections you make and the relationships you foster, and you can't go wrong. And the sky's the limit, basically. And I'm so happy I was able to be here and provide any type of guidance that could help you.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Boyce actually just, wonderfully dropped his email and his Twitter. Science Twitter is a real thing. It just keeps moving. It's crazy to me. But yeah, please, feel free to reach out to our panelists. I want to thank all of you for being so candid, so honest, and yet also so supportive, right? It's very easy for us to get stuck in, the negative things we've been through. And I just appreciate, you keeping us alive and keeping our dreams alive. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And thank you so much to the audience for coming. The attendance at this panel is incredible, especially, Zoom is hard. So appreciate you braving through the Zoom fatigue to be here. And just, hope you all have a lovely day.